You suggested that we discuss Storybrand by Don Miller. Tell us a little bit about where you were at when you came across this book.
When we started Innovation City, because if you're not understood, where's the value in it for the customer? Clarity is really key. For most businesses, it's all about them, their processes, their algorithms, their AI agents. You are not the hero. Your customer is. And we were fortunate enough to get Old Mutual and MTN as our first two customers, and then Launch Africa VC joined us, and we had a story to tell.
Welcome to the Non-Fiction Book Club, the book club for people who believe reading changes the world because reading changes us. I'm your host, John Bradshaw, and we have a great show for you today. Now, it is my great privilege to welcome Kieno Kammies on the Non-Fiction Book Club. Kieno Kammies was one of South Africa's top radio personalities for 25 years. He then reinvented himself as an ecosystem builder, driving innovation in South Africa. He's a member of Business Island South Africa, a board member at SIBA, involved in all sorts of things, but where I have most interacted with you is you're a founder of Innovation City, a brilliant community of startup founders, VCs, innovative companies working to drive innovation in South Africa. And I'm really excited to have Kieno on the show because Kieno is a story crafter, a story builder, just so good at that. And so we've got a great book to discuss. But Kieno, so great to have you on the show today.
Absolute privilege, John. You've been involved in this innovation thing much more than I have, so I'm looking forward to shooting the breeze with you.
Lovely. Okay, well, you suggested that we discuss the book Storybrand by Don Miller. There's now Storybrand 2.0, which is an updated version. This is a book that had a great impact on me, so I was very keen to discuss it. But do you want to tell us a little bit about where you were at when you came across this book?
You know, it's one thing being on radio for 25 years and subliminally, you know, the whole story mechanism keeps working. You don't analyze it. You just do your thing. You're on the treadmill and you're telling stories, you're listening, you're interpreting stories. But when you start your own business, when you've got a couple of people around you who've got different ideas about positioning, etc., clarity is really key. And it is when we started, Stefan Egberg and I, we started Innovation City. That is when I thought, hold on, everything I thought I knew about storytelling is very unstructured. I better go and find the best book and the best insights. And Don Miller obviously came very highly recommended. And the thing I love about Miller is the simplicity and the most important thing, you are not the hero. Your customer is. And it's those two. I know we'll get into it, but it's those two, you know, when you start telling your story, you need to be seen, you need to be heard, but most importantly, you need to be understood. Because if you're not understood, where's the value in it for the customer?
I think that's so brilliant. And so much of what he does is really common sense that he kind of puts structure behind. Why do you think we struggle so much with this idea of getting our story across clearly?
Well, I think ultimately, for most people, most businesses, it's all about them, their processes that lead to value. And what they tend to do is focus on the processes. They focus on the technology. I see it with tech businesses all the time. Instead of communicating the value to the customer, the end value, the end story, they start talking about their Pythons, their algorithms, their AI agents, and quite frankly, that goes over a lot of people's heads. They utilize those tools to deliver value. So focus on value. Focus on how the value would make the customer's life a lot easier. How the value actually makes the customer the hero. And that is what I get out of it. We should stop navel gazing. We should stop thinking about our story, because we want to tell everybody that we're the best. But you're only the best by bringing the best out of others. That's my take on it in any case.
This idea of the customer as a hero, when I first came across it, I'd just been made marketing director at Pick n Pay. It was like a punch in the stomach because we're so focused on being the best we can as a business, the best we can as a leader, that this idea that, no, we're the guide, with a guide. We have to articulate it. I mean, it was just such a huge concept for me, and that totally changed how I think about marketing and telling the story of my company.
But now remember, Raymond Ackerman, for a long time, God rest his soul, what a lovely man, he was the story because he started this business. He'd gone through a really tough time initially and got this business off the ground. But even when he was the story, the media made him the story, the customer value always came out. And sometimes you're going to have iconic people in your business. And there's nothing wrong with that founding story being told. But ultimately, when I communicate what my business offers you, it's less about the founding story and more about the value that my business, Pick and Pay or whatever, offers you as a client. We allow you to get the freshest food. We allow you to make the quickest meal so that you can spend more time with your kids. That's the type of messaging we should gravitate towards when dealing with the customer.
And it's, I mean, you make a great point about Raymond Ackerman. As much as he was a central figure, one of his favorite phrases was, "Make the customer queen and she will make you king." So he saw the power to success totally by elevating the customer as the hero of the story. And I think when you get in turbulent waters, that's always the risk, that you start to look internally because you're so focused on fixing the business that you forget that core to fixing the business is taking the hero on the hero's journey.
Correct.
So I think it's worth just giving a little introduction to the full framework. So what Don Miller would say is, there's a character who has a problem, meets a guide who we want to be our company, who gives them a plan, calls them to action, helps them to avoid failure, and then ends in success for the customer. And that's, 7 steps, a lot of steps, but often companies can get it right and they just manage to capture the essence of it. Have you seen anyone in the startup space that you think really gets that communication right?
Well, I think the one thing that comes to mind, I mean, there are a couple of businesses, but I think the one that gets it spot on, and the reason why this company really sticks in my mind, is because it's so easy for them to complicate their own lives because of what they do. It's Sequoia Capital. Sequoia Capital, probably the most well-known VC globally. We love Sequoia because there's a South African running it. Okay. Only guy to get straight A's, I think 100% in actuarial sciences at UCT, Rudolf Buerta. But they could talk about a myriad of things. They could talk about how they analyze businesses and all this in-depth nonsense, and they don't. And they have a very, very simple call phrase, if you like, if you get onto the website. And you're going to have to help me out here. As I know we've spoken about this earlier, but it is, we help, I think, the brave build legendary companies.
Yeah.
And the brave means you're putting all on the line, right? It's all about you, the customer of Sequoia. And Sequoia is the Yoda. We point you in the right direction as Sequoia. Because you know what? Together, with our advice, with our plan, you're going to build a legendary company. And it's that simple. I mean, just think about, go to some other VC websites, venture capital firm websites, private equity firm websites.
Yeah.
It gets messy and complicated. And if you go further down Sequoia's page, you'll just see little story blocks, and they tell the stories of these companies.
Just give the evidence.
Yeah.
So great. And I think that both this, we help the brave, which is clear, the customer is the hero, they're the brave people, they're the ones building legendary companies, but then giving them a real vision for what success looks like if they partner with Sequoia versus, over 20 years of market beating returns, or nobody's invested in more unicorns. And so, there are 1,000 things they could say that would make them the hero, but that willingness to subvert themselves to their customer story, and also the evidence that their customer is the startup. not the investor.
Exactly right.
Which is what comes through so strongly there.
Well, in I shouldn't say this, but in many cases, the investor becomes the villain. So best not once they get involved in boards and everything. But let me not go down a rabbit hole. Let's keep it simple.
Lovely. Well, look, I think you mentioned a little bit that your career in radio giving you an intuitive feel for story. Well, the first time we met, I was plugging Super Animals, and I came and jumped into your studio uninvited. And I think most of us, when we listen to the radio, we think it doesn't sound so hard, right? There's a guy talking, they're talking nonsense, they put on a few songs. That was a great eye-opener for me, because you were interviewing someone. At the same time you were interviewing him, you played with our Super Animals cards while keeping the interview going, pressing a host of buttons on the desk. And then also somebody handed you a scrap of paper and you did a perfect live read. And I was like, there's an actual skill to this. So clearly you, 25 years, got to the top of that game. What do you feel like it taught you about story?
Listening. You see, when you go on air, you've got to put yourself in other people's shoes. So number one, who exactly is your core audience? Who's listening to you? So I've learned at an early stage, you've got to reverse engineer things in life sometimes. What is the ultimate story? What are you trying to gain out of this particular interview, right? And why does that matter to the person listening to me? Now, if I don't know who's listening to me, I'm going to be shooting all over the place. Hopefully it'll be, somewhere more hit than miss, but chances are it's more miss than hit. So it's no different with business. You need to have a very clear understanding as to who your customer is. What are their pain points? What makes them react to certain things because of what you know about their daily lives? If you don't know that, right, then you're dead in the water. You're taking chances. And at the same time, you're interviewing someone that might be doing something that your customer base believes is not the right thing. You also have to put yourself in the other person's shoes, because when I was on air, I played devil's advocate. And you have to understand where people come from in order to be able to do that, and in order to hit the right buttons. So if you ask me, just to answer your question simply, it really taught me how to listen. And then internalize, and then bring out the best, and eventually evoke what I wanted to evoke in the very first place, before even starting that interview, knowing what I know about the individuals.
But there's an implicit desire to give the listener what they would want to get out of that discussion with them. That it's almost that listening well to the guest in order to pull out what's going to be instructive.
Not always. Sometimes you want to upset the listener.
Okay.
Sometimes the listener, if you know something about the listener and you know that they've got a hobby horse and whatever, it's not really good for society or whatever, or they've got a certain way of thinking, you've got to challenge them. Because if you're not challenging people, you're not getting them to grow. So once again, in business, it's going to be little, you don't peeve off your customers half the time. Right. And I remember chatting to Michelle van Bradshaw, legendary editor. I think Sari is still around. I think she's still the editor-in-chief of Sari. And I remember Sari magazine, one of the few magazines that are still successful. She took over this very liberal Afrikaans powerhouse, right? And a very Afrikaans magazine. Very conservative, I use that word respectfully, very conservative magazine. And what she did was she started bringing people like Nathaniel in, who was Afrikaans, but had a different take on life. But she kept 50% of the conservative thought leaders, etc., and then did that juxtaposition between the two. And essentially what she did was, she started winning people over. As much as someone read something which is a little bit more conservative and stayed, I'm now reading Nathaniel and I'm going, hey, hold on. Okay, that makes me think. So it all depends what you want to get out of it at the end of the day, but you need to understand people's stories to be able to do that.
And the ability to, I love what you're describing there, because she's almost inviting her conservative readers, as you were inviting some of your conservative listeners, on their own hero's journey of self-development.
Correct.
Right? This challenging, what is the greatest challenge? To look at some of your core beliefs and go. And the two things that Don Miller says a guide needs to show is empathy.
Correct.
And credibility.
100%.
So that's, this ability to keep 50% of the content is still safe for you. You can go, it's unchallenging, but within that empathy and credibility, I can draw you. I think that's absolutely a brilliant example.
I had someone once, and I broadcast on many radio stations, but I remember in Pretoria, a guy phoned me from Pretoria, old Afrikaans guy. I love the Afrikaans people, by the way, because you know what? They're great stories and you know where you stand with them. And I was on 702 at the time and I said something. And I mean, for the life of me, I can't remember exactly what I said, but I remember his response. He phoned in and he said, Kieno, don't rattle my cage. The door's going to open. When you elicit this type of response from people, you know you're hitting a nerve.
He's still listening.
When the former Speaker of Parliament, Frini Janwala, met me for the first time, she says, are you Kieno Kammies? You know how many times I've wanted to slap you? I remember Angie Motshekga, the now Minister of Defense, and she's been a whole lot of other stuff. I remember her phoning in one day going, Kieno, when we get home, this is me and my cabinet meetings, etc. When I get home with my kids, my mother says, shh, we're listening to Talk at 9. So it's, I mean, how do I actually put it? I think you're not going to satisfy everybody, but if you know what you're dealing with and who you're dealing with, it makes life so much simpler. No different for business, by the way.
Yeah.
If you also have to challenge your customers.
Yeah.
Right? And we go back to the cliched comment that everybody makes. Well, you want to continue using faster horses, or do you want to try out a car, for example? So you've got to, but it's got to be authentic.
It's got to be authentic. And I think it's also got to be respectful.
Yeah.
I think customers can really feel the difference between, even in this radio example, a radio host that's challenging them because it wants them to think, and there's an authenticity and a genuineness about them.
Yeah.
And then someone who's just being a shock jock, who's just trying to wind everyone up, which tends to have a fairly short half-life.
Yeah, they normally end up with TV shows that last for one season. Or
this is going to get personal.
We don't go there.
So this transition, I'm really interested. I mean, it feels like a huge pivot. You were very experienced in media, very respected there. You then took this opportunity with founding Innovation City. How did you find that transition? How are you finding that transition?
Literally building a bridge as you're crossing it, right? COVID was a terrible time for all of us. I was in hospital for a bit. I had stuff up my nose. I had to ask myself a couple of questions. I was released from hospital and I cried in my very first interview on Cape Talk the next day. I was so tired. I couldn't walk from here 10 meters. I couldn't walk. I was exhausted. And I remember Suzanne Ackerman messaging me going, Kieno, I have long COVID. Just take it easy. Just take it easy. And I said to my wife, somewhere, I was off. They still allowed me to be off for 2 weeks, 3 weeks afterwards. And I said, I don't feel like going back. And I said, the reason I don't want to go back is because I don't think I can handle this constant treadmill of negative news. Now, I won't go into my contract or anything, but I knew if there were certain, if I decided to move on or whatever, certain things would come into play and I wouldn't be in a very bad position. So I decided to do that. And I had about a year to sort of figure my life out. And about 2 months into that, I get a call from Rob Paddock. And I was part of the sort of founding team of UCT Online High School.
Rob came out of Valencia.
Yeah, out of Valencia.
You were head of culture.
Head of culture. Still trying to figure that one out.
Yeah.
So he phoned me. He says, listen, always wanted to work with you. What are you doing? I said, I'm on my way back from the shop. He said, listen, I'm thinking, doing UCT Online High School, I'm thinking about a role called Head of Culture. And I'm like, what the heck is that? And I mean, I got into that and it was fun. It was fun. And then about 2.5 months later, spoke to an old friend of mine, Stefan Egberg, who I've interviewed over years, and we were threatening to do some stuff together as well, the Travel Start CEO.
Yeah.
And long story short, he said to me, listen, COVID's given us a bit of a knock. We've got a building, not sure what to do with it. Just let's make this very concise. I sat down with him. We discussed what potentially could happen. Are we going to get VCs and startups? I suggested we're getting corporates, and they were going, how are you going to get the corporates in? I said, well, I've spoken to the corporates during COVID, and they're all looking to pivot and do other things to help stay relevant. And between myself, Stefan, Laurie Joffe, we started, mingling and chatting to people, and we were fortunate enough to get Old Mutual and MTN as our first 2 customers in the building, and then Launch Africa VC, the most prolific C to pre-Series A VC, joined us, and we had a story to tell. They were the heroes, and we were enabling them.
Yeah.
And that's how it happened. I mean, but took me, this whole thing, the whole transition took about, probably about 6 months for all of that to unfold.
And as you've got involved in this startup ecosystem, running all the way from the innovative corporates to these guys who had an idea and are making it happen in your space, what surprised you about the innovation space?
Well, what surprised me was really starting to understand to which extent people are actually going to try and change the world around them. Because, you're on a radio. One of the reasons I spoke about entrepreneurship on radio is because I was sick and tired of the news. I kept fighting with the editor going, why are we talking about, Africa going to hell in a handbasket? And what I found was when you start getting introduced to these entrepreneurs, the very issues that news dealt with, a lot of those issues were actually being fixed, or at least people were trying to fix them using innovation. And that really surprised me. I did not understand to which extent people are actually going out there trying to change the world around them. I was oblivious to all sorts of technologies, etc., right? I mean, I went on an executive course to MIT. I then ended up doing an honors in small enterprise consulting just to, get this little brain to wake up. But that was the surprising.
The surprise, just the amount of energy that's happening.
Energy and innovation taking place.
Sure. Well, it does feel like your 2 careers are coming together a little bit now. The storytelling on radio, the innovation ecosystem. You've got Innovate Africa. You want to talk a little bit about some of the exciting things you're working on at the moment?
Okay, so Innovate Africa, in short, is a storytelling platform. And we tell stories of innovative founders who impact lives on the African continent. Now, it's some people would argue a traditional media play. So I partner with Arena Media, so they own the Sunday Times, Business Day, TV Business Day, which is a great partnership. But I was in the shower the one day, and this is a true story, going, how the heck am I going to make money out of this other than sponsorships and advertising?
Sure.
And by that time, I'd already met a company called Summit.Deals. And what Summit.Deals essentially do is they have all these amazing, vetted, innovative, high-growth scale-ups, high-growth startups, and then funders on the other side, right? And the next morning, while in the shower, I was thinking, I read something about a search fund some time ago. Why don't we turn the media business into a search fund where people pay you to search for the type of businesses that they're looking to invest in, right? And then I started developing this, started chatting to Summit, and that ended up with this Innovate Africa fund that we are in the process of launching. And it's not like any other VC. I'm not interested in investment committees. Let me tell you, I hate most things done by committee. So we want to get individual high net worth individuals, right? And Each one of those individuals must make up their own minds as to what they want to invest in. But that's not the only thing. They also need to have keys to the castle, i.e., how do you help this business to scale? Do you know someone in Ireland, for example, that will need this particular service? Can you get us someone to write out an expression of interest in this business while we put a proof of concept to
So you can really help them get distribution.
Correct. So normally VCs play in the funding space and they love the P&L pilots, right? They'll look at this and it's all projections. But imagine you did those projections based on real access to market, real expressions of interest. It becomes more powerful. And so that is a model that
So the idea is that you would tell the story of these startups as a way of getting them funding from your high net worth individuals that were already part of the ecosystem.
Funding is an afterthought. We're still a media company.
Okay.
So we still need to tell authentic stories.
Right.
I'm not going to go and invent stories. We're still talking.
You're not pitching the companies for them. You're telling the stories of the.
I'm telling the stories, and of course, we search for great stories on the continent. We're primarily Africa focused at the moment, right? So I would call Innovate Africa. So we focused on innovative businesses with reasonable scale, right, impacting lives. And what those investors allow us to do is diversify the type of businesses that we're looking for. But the editorial policy is still the editorial policy. We don't change editorial to suit the investor. So matching that is quite key. And quite frankly, very few people know about what's happening on the African continent. I mean, I was on radio for how long? I didn't know. I was surprised when I got to Innovation City, looking at the extent of really positive, innovative work being done on our continent. I look at all these foreign investors coming in, supporting these businesses. We need to be telling their stories. And I would love Innovate Africa to be this mouthpiece for innovative businesses on the African continent and the people who support them. But we want to share this, whatever we do in Africa and South Africa, we want to share in Europe. We want to share in the United States, for those who want to listen to us. We want to share it in Southeast Asia, etc. So it's about building partnerships with other media houses and providing them with content which is unique, something they can't deliver. So we want to carve out our own niche, innovation niche, African niche. Alongside other media houses, traditional media houses.
Okay. I mean, coming back to the Don Miller book, it really feels like those African innovators, they're not the hero of the story, and the role Innovate Africa plays as the guide in getting that story out there, helping them to tell their story well to the world in order to attract funding and distribution in order to bring African innovation to the world.
And Innovation City factors into that, because a lot of people who want to support African businesses, high growth startups, need to have a foot in the continent. So in the past, I used to do 5 different things, and you know what? None of them had anything to do with each other. Today, my common thread is telling story and innovation, and then connecting the dots. That's it.
Telling the stories of innovation and connecting the dots. Well, I think that's wonderful. I think it's fascinating, and I'm really excited to see how combining this story with funding and potentially access to distribution, how that helps businesses to scale up.
Yeah, we're busy building that bridge, eh? It hasn't caved in yet, so I'm feeling positive.
Wonderful. Well, Kieno, thank you so much for coming and spending time with us as a non-fiction book club. If you're looking to tell the story of your business or company, Storybrand is just a brilliant, very, very practical way to do it. You'll definitely change your website after reading it. Kieno, thank you so much for being on the show.
What a pleasure.
A big thank you to our headline sponsor, Innate. Next time you're talking to your financial advisor, ask them what platform they're using to manage the administration of your investments. If they say Innate, you can take comfort knowing they're using technology to work smarter and serve you better. Visit innate.co.za to find out more. A reminder to sign up to our newsletter to always be the first to hear about book reviews, interviews, and to get book discounts on great books from our book partners' exclusive books.